Welcome once again to Pale Blends and Beyond. Thank you for joining us. Ed Deane is an Irish blues guitarist and singer who not only plays the electric and acoustic versions, but also slide guitar and lap steel guitar. It's also interesting that Ed plays left-handed guitar, playing right-handed guitar upside down. Bands like Granny's Intentions, The Woods Band, Skid Row, Bees Make Honey, and Juice on the Loose have all counted Mr. Deane in their ranks at one time or another. Ed has recorded with artists Graham Parker, Frankie Miller, Dana Gillespie, and Shane McGowan, and toured with the likes of Bob Dylan, Donovan, Van Morrison, and Nick Lowe. And over the years, he has recorded and gigged alongside some of the best R&B artists. Well, welcome, Ed.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to visit with me. So let's go back a few years. So you were born in Dublin?
Yeah.
Okay. Recall some of your childhood memories there.
Yeah, so this kind of this is like in the 50s when I was growing up, and that was listening to whatever music there was around there then. When I was growing up in the suburbs in Dublin, my parents had records like by people like Doris Day and stuff like that, let me think who else. Some maybe Frank Sinatra, that kind of stuff. I didn't hear much rock and roll music, and later on, when I was a bit older, we moved house, and we let out to make some money. We let out the bottom part of the house to like for as kind of like a separate apartments kind of thing, and so we had students staying there, these kind of beatnik kind of students from Canada, I think. And when they left this pile of records behind, old 78 records by Duke Ellington. And
oh wow!
And they were just fantastic. I mean, I just there was like a kind of a booklet of them, like these old titles like Drop Me Off at Harlem and Mood Indigo and Black Beauty, and they were just fantastic records. And I think, well, I mean, I liked all the early music that I heard and stuff I'd hear on the radio, but I think with those Duke Ellington records really had an effect on me. I was about maybe 11 or 12 at that stage.
Yeah. Did they resonated with you a little bit?
Yeah, they did. Yeah, really.
Were either one of your parents musically inclined at all?
Well, yeah. I mean, they used to have these kind of get-togethers where my aunts and uncles would be invited and friends of the family and stuff. Everybody'd have a few drinks and the room would be filled with cigarette smoke, and everybody had to sing, and my father always sang like songs by Jimmy Rogers, not the blues Jimmy Rogers, but the country artist. And he was a big fan of Jimmy Rogers, and my mother could sing. She liked, she'd sing. I can't remember quite what she would sing. She could sing nicely in tune and stuff. But and my grandmother, my father's mother, she played the fiddle. She played like jigs and reels and stuff like that. So okay. Yeah.
Well, what was the? Well, let me ask you this first. When you got a little bit older as a teenager, what bands and artists did you start getting into?
Well, I mean, when I first started with a couple of school friends, when I finally I got a cheap electric guitar and access to some kind of terrible amplifier and stuff, kind of like a school band. Like after school, we'd rehearse. I liked songs. At that point, it was like, like the Beatles and the Kinks and stuff like that. We were about 14, maybe that kind of age. Just I loved all that kind of British kind of R&B, which I suppose is kind of spirit. I mean, at that point, I had seen the Stones in Dublin live, and I'd seen maybe the Who and I think I remember seeing the Creation. Yeah, do you remember them? And
Yeah,
bands and the Hollies, who
yes.
were great, and so we were kind of like playing that kind of stuff, but it was later on. Um, I used to listen to this program when I was kind of like doing my homework. Or it was the Voice of America Jazz Hour, and I think it was broadcast in Europe for the armed forces, who were based in Germany and stuff.
Sorry, I just wanted to put this.
Oh yeah, great.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, it's got well, that's where that's what is his name?
I
Alan
can't remember.
Alan McGee. Alan McGee later
Oh
on
yeah,
created the Creation label based on this on the band. So yeah,
yeah.
and all that music. So continue. Sorry.
No, no, it's they were great actually. That band. I only just saw them that once, and the guitarist he was pre Jimmy Page playing guitar with a violin bow. And
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's that's definitely a different take on that for sure.
yeah,
Well, go
yeah.
ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Sorry.
No, I mean I suppose I'm just talking about the next kind of phase after listening to all that. Well, playing and that kind of music that was very current at the time. And then I was listening, to this program, The Voice of America, and they used to play mainly jazz stuff, at night. But then one night they played Son House, and Al Wilson, I think, was playing second guitar, and I think they were doing Empire State Express, and I just never heard anything like that. It was just fantastic. Don't know. It was just so, these interweaving guitars and Sunhouse's voice and was just so great. So that kind of coincided with, getting into blues, mainly through like the Stones and then maybe that John Mayall Blues Breakers album.
Right.
Um, and hearing Eric Clapton playing at that time, that was that really kind of impressed me, so I was kind of and there was this kind of the sort of the blues boom that was going on
Yeah.
in England and in Ireland to an extent. There were some great bands. I mean, I used to see in Ireland like Irish bands like the People, who later became the Heir Apparent, with Henry McCulloch on guitar and
Right.
Chrissy Stewart on bass. And they later became the Heir Apparent and touring with Hendrix. And
Yeah. Henry
so,
Henry passed away not too long
yeah,
ago.
yeah, sadly he did. Yeah, a couple of years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. And I had the honor of doing a bunch of gigs with him, in the years leading up to that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and it was just very sad.
Thankfully, you did get to play with him.
Yeah.
Fond memories, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you talked a little bit about the scene there and in and around Dublin. Some of the other, like you talked about, there were some blues bands there. Can you remember when you first started picking up the guitar and started messing around with it?
Well, I think like a lot of people, I got a kind of, my mother got me a guitar. Well, I think I was about 11, and it was a kind of a cheap kind of guitar. It wasn't like wildly expensive or anything, and the strings were really kind of far away from the fretboard, and it was like hard work in a way, you know. And then I remember we went to Belfast, and this is maybe a couple of years later, because I got slightly put off by the action on this guitar. You know, it was hard to play. And then I got an electric guitar, like again something like a Starway or something. You know, like But and I remember plugging it. We had this old radio, like a Pilot radio, that was kind of shaped like the Empire State Building, you know, one of those kind of radios. And I plugged the guitar into the back of this radio, and it worked as an amplifier. I was amazed. So, you know, my first power chord, it was like, wow, you know.
Emanating out of the Empire State Building.
Yeah. And it actually eventually went up in smoke. You know, it was just so old that one day smoke started coming out of it.
You thought you were just tearing it up so much that it was.
That's it.
Yeah, it was smoking. Oh man, that's funny. Well, talk a little bit about your style. Did you start playing the backwards, upside down right guitar left-handed early on, or was that something you did later?
Yeah, I mean, even before I played guitar, I remember there was a fiddle lying around the house. It was I belonged to my grandmother, I think. Only like it had a couple of strings on it probably, and I used to just play it. But I naturally picked it up left-handed. I didn't bow it or anything. I was just plucking at it, and I just enjoyed the sound of it, you know. And the same with guitar. I mean, I just naturally picked it up left-handed, and I didn't really know enough. I didn't have any teachers or anything like that. And in a way, yeah, I just started playing like that. And then I mean, it just never really occurred to me to restring it like in a kind of orthodox way until years later. You know? It's like pushing strings when you're bending notes is kind of hard work to me, but pulling them, you can really sort of, you know, pulling them is much. You can just bend them more in a way, but beyond that, I don't know if I recommend somebody to start playing left and upside down. Okay, and the other thing is actually that there wasn't a lot of left-handed guitars around anyway. You wouldn't see left-handed guitars in a music shop.
Right.
Very rarely, you know, especially around that time.
Right. I guess you know, Jimi Hendrix was one of the early ones, left-handed, and I'm sure there's others. That's one that. Yeah,
he strung it around in kind of orthodox, you know, with the first string like facing like nearest the floor, you know. But
yeah,
like other guitarists that were left-handed, were Albert King, like he played the same. He played upside down, like okay. I did, and there were a few, like Otis Rush played like that too.
Okay.
So that was kind of encouraging.
There you go. If they can do it, yeah, right. Well, was your let me ask you, was your first band Blues House?
Yeah, it was really. Besides those kind of school bands, yeah, I mean, it was actually, yeah, Blues House, and we were kind of. It was a great time really, because again, that kind of blues boom, I suppose, as it was called, was going on, and there was a promoter in Ireland called Larry Roddy, who was a really great blues enthusiast, and he was getting these guys that were mainly touring in England, like Arthur Big Boy Crudup and Fred McDowell and Johnny Shines, Champion Jack Dupree. He got all those guys to come over to Ireland, and we opened for them, you know, and it was just such a great learning experience, really, you know, kind of sitting at their feet, you know. I mean, Johnny Shines and
hearing that firsthand. Yeah,
yeah,
they seem to have a more receptive audience over there than they did here at home too, you know.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, I don't know if there, yeah, if there were the sort of the blues boom kind of thing. I think that really happened in a way through it was helped along greatly by, you know, the Stones, and they were just really popular at the time, and well, you know, they were just the Stones, like they were just a great band, and they still are. But mm, yeah, well, maybe there was a different thing in America with kind of segregation and all that. I don't know, you know. But I mean, in a way, then it did change in a way in America. Like people like Muddy Waters and all were much more appreciated as time kind of went by.
You're right.
By white audiences and.
Right, I think you're right. It did take time. Well, playing alongside some of those blues musicians, do you have any interesting anecdotes that you recall?
I don't know really. I just remember somebody like Johnny Shines being really friendly and coming up to me, and he said something to the effect of like, "Carry it on, keep this, you know," and that really gave me a lot of encouragement. And I remember my parents coming to see when me playing, or well, opening really for Champion Jack Dupree, you know, and then I mean, he had a pretty raunchy sense of humor. You know, he told all these kind of really raunchy kind of jokes, and I was kind of going, "Oh God, no," you know. But I think my parents were quite amused.
Speaking of your parents, I forgot to ask you, were they real supportive and you're, wanting to be a musician and behind you?
Yeah. Yeah, they, well, yeah, my mother, yeah, they both were really, yeah. My mother used to drive me to gigs, and, you know, she even understood, you know, like if I wanted to be, you know, it's like we used to play in this place. We had a residency every Sunday afternoon in this place, and it was really popular. People would be queuing and stuff like that in the street. So I didn't want to be seen getting dropped off by my mother, so I'd get her to drop me off around the corner, you know. So she was very understanding of that.
Like kids that go to school, it's like, don't pull up too close to the entrance.
Yeah.
That's funny. Well, Gary Moore and Phil Lynott were part of some of those sessions. Well, those early sessions.
Oh yeah, yeah.
How
Gary
about,
used to, yeah.
Go ahead.
Gary used to get up and play with us sometimes. He liked our band. I remember we did a kind of a twin harmony guitar version of Amazing Grace. And I remember playing that with Gary. He was just such a great guitar player. He was superb, really, you know, fantastic player. Yeah, and Philip, he used to, he was kind of, well, I remember kind of very, early versions of Thin Lizzy playing, and some of the, seeing them playing, you know, and yeah, all those people were around, yeah.
Do you have any Phil Lynott stories?
Yeah, I'm sure I do, yeah. I mean, when I was with the Woods band, he was coming down to see us quite a lot. He was very friendly with Terry Woods, and he was kind of interested in what we were doing. And Philip was really loved in Dublin, you know, like there's a pub in Dublin called the Bailey. At that time, it was quite a cool place to kind of hang out. And, you know, Philip would be there at Christmas time and people just coming in to see him and, you know, buying him drinks or him buying them drinks. And, you know, it was always quite a thing when he came back. And even I remember him telling me one time that he thought he was going to die young, basically. I remember him telling me that at a certain point. And I thought, oh yeah, come on, you're just trying to be, you know, dramatic. But you know, we actually were in this house in London. There was a house in Hampstead in London where all the Irish bands who went to London. I was with Granny's Intentions at that time. This house was in Belsize Avenue in Hampstead, and it was kind of like the hangout of the Irish Mafia, as it was called, you know. And Philip was there, Gary Moore, and a band called Doctor Strangely Strange, and
yeah.
Everybody stayed at that house at some point. And Philip was always up early in the morning, you know, like the rest of us weren't really like early risers, you know. But I mean, he was kind of up doing business for the band, and he was pretty organized and ambitious kind of guy.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, what an icon he was. I tell you.
Yeah, really.
When did you move to London?
I think it was the year Hendrix died. Actually, was that 71 or was it 70?
I think it was 70.
Yeah, I got sort of Granny's Intentions kind of offered me the gig as a guitar player. So that was just after Blues House, and Blues House was kind of falling apart at that point anyway. So I kind of took it, and it was kind of fairly quick. They said, well, it's next week. Can you come to London next week? And I said, yeah. They were in Ireland at the time. And and that's when I went to live in that house in Hampstead. And so, yeah, it was quite a big change from Dublin, you know. I mean, you know, London is kind of, I didn't know anybody, but it was a strange kind of time. It's kind of like the 60s were over and all that, and there was a slightly hungover feeling in a way in London. You know, Hendrix had gone, and you know, it was a sort of, yeah, kind of a nod kind of time in a way, but it was fine. I enjoyed it. It was great also, you know, being there and being able to play music. And we had a manager called John G, and he used to manage the Marquee Club, or I think he ran it or something like that.
Oh, okay. That was the place to play.
Yeah, that was the place to play. Like we got these gigs like opening for, I remember, I think we opened for the Faces at one of their very first gigs, really, you know, and they just seemed to be having such a good time. I remember Ronnie Wood came in when they were sound checking. He had this guitar, and I think he played it on stage as well, with the price tag hanging off it. You know, he left the price tag on it. And they just sounded, they were great.
I wonder if he was trying to advertise. That's funny. Well, we'll talk a little bit more about you. You must have had, did you guys mesh pretty well? The other members in Granny's Intentions work well together?
Yeah, they were a great bunch of people, you know. But I mean, it was a kind of slightly confused time, actually. I mean, I think, you know, around that time, like we were playing this kind of kind of psychedelic sort of country rock kind of stuff, but it wasn't, like Johnny Doohan, the main songwriter. He wasn't actually. He wasn't happy being a front man in a rock and roll band actually anymore, and he wanted to really. I think he really wanted to quit, and just it was also the kind of a time of these kind of emerging kind of singer-songwriters like Cat Stevens and James Taylor and people like that. And I think Johnny was quite influenced by all that. And so it was a kind of a, it's hard for me to even remember how long the band lasted. I doubt if it was longer than a year. And Johnny did eventually quit and stuck to his guns, and he's still, he's still doing exactly what he wanted to do. He's got quite a few albums out and a couple of books, and he's got his own voice, So
how long after? When did you come into the orbit of Terry and Gay Woods?
Well, that was just after Granny's Intentions, actually. I was aware of Terry, I'm not so much Gay, but Terry, I knew because I used to hear him on the radio he used to play with a band called Sweeney's Men.
Yeah.
And they were just a fantastic band. And they did do Irish music, but they did this kind of, Terry had this kind of Appalachian kind of thing going as well. And he had such a great voice. And,
Andy Irvine, right? Andy Irvine.
Yeah, Andy Irvine, yeah. And another great singer and player, yeah. And Johnny Moynihan, who was...
there you go.
They were fantastic. I think they put out maybe 2 albums, and they're great albums, I think, anyway. They've aged well, I think, So, that was kind of it. I was sort of despairing slightly when Granny's Intentions broke up, thinking, I don't know, what am I doing this for, And then the phone rang, and it was Terry Woods, and said, would you be interested in working with me, And he had this idea of merging Irish traditional music with kind of rock music or rock and roll, whatever, electric music. And I thought it was a great idea. It was quite very original. I thought at that time it was very new and innovative in a way. And in Ireland, it was great playing American blues and everything. But I kind of thought, oh yeah, like actually playing Irish music. Not that I had much experience playing Irish music. In fact, I had no experience playing Irish music. I didn't know. But it's sort of, I'd heard a lot of it on the radio, and so you kind of grew up hearing it, you know what I mean? So there is that kind of understanding of it, but, and there were bands, I think, emerging at that time, like maybe Fairport Convention, they were doing a similar thing. And Terry and Gay had played with Steel Eye Span. So I think they were doing a similar thing with English folk music in a way.
Yeah. And Pentangle, another one that was,
Yeah, even though they were more kind of acoustic, really. I don't think there was...
they were.
But yeah, they were. That's right, Pentangle, yeah. And just... and all those people that were around, like Bert Jans and John Renburn and
Great.
So
Well, you must have. How long were you in the Woods band? Did you enjoy that time in your life?
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. Yeah, it was great fun. It was the first time I ever toured really outside of England. We toured around Scandinavia quite a lot, Denmark and Norway and Sweden and Holland. We were big in Nijmegen. We used to make these jokes about we're big in Nijmegen.
You know, that's interesting you bring that up about Holland because a lot of UK musicians are really popular in Holland.
Yeah,
Yeah, around that time period you're talking about, and probably still, but it's just the audiences there were just so warm and welcoming and just hungry for that.
yeah,
And
really great. Yeah,
a lot of them would be more popular in Holland, and then they go back to England and nobody knows them. That
yeah,
kind of story.
yeah,
So yeah,
sure.
so
So,
so the
yeah,
Scandinavian audiences were pretty receptive and
very receptive. Yeah, uh, and it was a kind of an eye opener, going there. Like I remember we played in a one of the gigs was actually at lunchtime in a school, like a sort of a kind of children's school, like start like from the age of I don't know 7 or 8 up to 16 or 17, and there were paintings all over the walls. We were in this hall, and it was it was a much brighter kind of environment than this kind of school I was used to as a kid, which was pretty gloomy in a way. And, this was something else. And the fact that they were having a band playing at lunchtime.
uh-huh.
I mean, it was just the whole way of thinking was, was much more, it was like much more kind of, what would you say, kind of innovative, or it was great being there.
Yeah. Well, you already had the artwork on the walls. You didn't really need a light show or any kind of show. You you had those images
Yeah,
set,
sure. Yeah.
set up for you. Well, I guess how long after you left Woods Band, you joined a reformed Skid Row? 73.
Yeah.
I guess, yeah. And
Yeah,
actually,
I'm actually trying to get things in order. Yeah, that was a kind of yeah. I think maybe that was it. I think I played. Oh yeah, well for a spell I actually played with a show band
okay.
in Ireland, and show bands were kind of a no-no, because they played all this bad kind of country and western and stuff like that. But this was a good show band. We used to play stuff by Sly and the Family Stone, and it had a horn section. We also had to play the top 20. We had to like learn whatever was in the top 20 at the time. Like tie a yellow ribbon or something like that. But we were also able to play. We were playing stuff by. There was another great guitarist in the band called Brian Harris. He used to play with an Irish band called Creatures, and I was knocked out to be in the same band as Brian. He was a fantastic player, and we used to do twin harmony things on him. We used to play things by the Allman Brothers, and it was the first time I'd ever played with a horn section, trumpet and saxophone.
Yeah.
And Noel Bridgman was playing drums, and it was a really, really good band actually. And then I think that kind of ended when that kind of whole glitter thing came in, and the manager wanted us to all kind of start wearing makeup and sort of glittery costumes. And we just said, no way, man, we're out of here, So that was the end of that band for us. So Skid Row came about after that. And Skid Row was financed by this kind of Irish kind of millionaire guy called Bill Fuller, who was actually married to my mother's cousin. My mother's cousin was an Irish singer called Carmel Quinn.
Okay.
And she used to sing with big bands around Ireland. And then she went to America. She was on the Ed Sullivan Show, and she sang kind of Irish American stuff, but also, like Rodgers and Hammerstein and all those kind of things. She had quite a few albums out on labels like the Dot label, and and she was married to this guy, Bill Fuller, and he was financing, kind of Skid Row, the revamped Skid Row. So we were actually rehearsing and getting paid quite a lot. And again, I was kind of in fairly esteemed company, The drummer was John Wilson from Taste.
Yeah.
Rory Gallagher's Taste. He's a great drummer. And The Brush, of course, playing bass, and he was something else. And we kind of expanded the band as it went along. At first, it was kind of in that three-piece kind of classic three-piece kind of thing, but we expanded a bit then, got a friend of mine, Kevin McAlee, playing piano, and a singer called Eamon Gibney, who was, but it didn't last that long. We got thrown off Irish television for kind of, I don't know, for maybe being uncooperative. We didn't want to have makeup and all that kind of stuff, And there's this floor production manager guy who was quite sort of neurotic in a way. And he just got fed. And I think Brush was being interviewed, and he was using bad language. It was only a rehearsal interview, but he was saying, "Oh, I don't fucking care," or something. And so that was enough. That was the breaking point, I think, for this floor manager. He said, "Right, get out of here, all of you." So we had to kind of pack our stuff and leave with our tails between our legs, kind of thing. And Bill Fuller, this manager, Bill Fuller was an interesting character. He sold one of the Fillmores to Bill Graham, and he was just a very interesting character. This guy, who was married to my mother's cousin. But when we got kicked off Irish television, he said, "That's it, boys." He compared it to racing. He said, "You fell at the first hurdle." He said, "Sorry, it's all over." And we were going, "What? Can't be." But it was. So that was the end of that band.
Okay, how devastating. Yeah, right. At the time, right?
Yeah, it was, because he had given us this amazing apartment to hang out in. That was right in the heart of Dublin, and it was above a derelict building. It was one of his hangouts. He had all these kind of secret hangouts where I think he used to kind of like help people from the IRA who were on the run and stuff like that. So he gave us this apartment. You walk into this derelict building with all the windows broken and glass everywhere, and you walk up to the very top floor, and the whole thing is just totally derelict. And you walk down this corridor, and there's a ladder, and you climb up this ladder, and you open this kind of trapdoor thing, and suddenly you're in the top floor, and it's beautiful, all this kind of antique American furniture, and it was a fantastic apartment, and that we were able to hang out in. And all that disappeared when we got thrown off Irish television.
Well, you mentioned IRA. Do you have any stories there?
Yeah, I remember like quite scary ones, really. When we were with Skid Row, when we were playing in Northern Ireland, we played a gig somewhere. I can't remember what county there, Antrim maybe. And at the end of the gig, we were in the dressing room. Everybody had gone home except the janitor, one of these remote kind of ballrooms in the middle of nowhere, and suddenly there was a half a battalion of the IRA with black berets and stuff, and saying, "You forgot to play the national anthem," which is, like the national anthem, the Star Spangled Banner, it's the Irish national anthem, which is, like in those days in cinemas, like at the end of a film, at the end of a movie, when the national anthem came on, everybody was supposed to stand up, and it was like, it was very nationalistic in a way. I made the mistake of saying to one of, which one, you know, because we're in Northern Ireland, what do you want, God Save the Queen or the other one? Which one do you want? Like, and he said, don't be cheeky, you know. So we had to get up on stage and there was just nobody there except these guys, like maybe a half a battalion, about 16 guys standing there in black berets, kind of to attention. And we were playing not very well, like, you know. And then they came into the dressing room when we finished and said, learn how to play it properly next time. And they stormed off. And we were quite nervous, you know, driving. They followed us for a good 10 miles down the road, you know, dark country road. And the guy who was driving us was really nervous. And then they just branched off down these little side kind of boring little side roads, you know. But that's one memory. There were a few others, but you know.
Well, you mentioned earlier you playing in the show band. The story of the Irish show band, that how they hijacked them on the road.
Oh yeah, you see that was all around that. Well, that was a few years later actually. I was actually playing in a band in France at that time, and my friend Kevin McAlee, who had also played with Skid Row, he had come over to play with this band in France also, and we were rehearsing in this fantastic, this beautiful stone house in the Basque country, and we were kind of taking a break from rehearsing and sitting out on this kind of patio. And he used to get, I think he used to get English papers like the Times and he was reading, and suddenly he went, what the fuck? His brother was in that band, you know, the Miami. And he escaped actually, but Kevin didn't know this at the time, and he was completely freaked out, and he had to leave and try to make phone calls, no mobile phones. You know, he had to try to find out what happened to his brother. And then his brother actually, I think, played dead or something like that. And he managed to escape afterwards. But I don't think he played music after that. I think he moved to Spain after that. He was just really
traumatized.
Really traumatized.
I can understand that. What that would do to your life too. Well, moving on to happier subject, but I wanted to hear a little bit about that. You played with the pub rock band Bees Make Honey, and even recorded an album, but it was never released, right?
Yeah, that's right. I don't think we were flavor of the month by that stage.
Yeah.
But it was sort of before sort of the punk thing, you know. It was like 75 maybe. And Nick Lowe produced. It was there were two producers actually. There was Nick Lowe produced one side, you know, that was the kind of the idea as we saw it. He produced like the maybe, I don't know whether it's the A side or the B side, and then this guy Wally Waller produced the other side, and he was the guitar player. Well, he was a rhythm guitarist and bass player from the Pretty Things, you know, and he was also a producer. And so it was like, and we did it in Rockfield in Wales, which was a great studio where you could live. You know, it was you could live there while you were recording for a couple of weeks, you know. I think, I don't know if it was that, it was a kind of okay, nice, sort of worthy kind of album, but I don't think it was any, I don't remember. I think there were one or two things that I remember liking on it, you know. In fact, an album came out, like Bees Make Honey compilation came out several years ago, and I think there were a couple of things that we did on that. And one of them was a song by Kevin McAlee, Friends of Dawn, I think it was called. And I liked that one, you know. But so yeah, it was kind of.
Was Dave Edmunds involved at all? Because you mentioned Rockfield. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I used to see him every now and again, but I didn't really know him, so no, he wasn't involved with that. And Nick was producing in Rockfield, and then Wally came down. So yeah, but it was that Dave Edmunds was kind of around, but he wasn't involved with that.
Well, I don't know if you've seen my interviews with Brinsley Schwartz and Ian Gong that I did.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just making the rounds with the pub circuit now.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed that period in music. I enjoyed that sound. Eggs Over Easy.
Yeah.
I think I got a compilation not too long ago and has a lot of those. It had one of Bees Make Honey. I remember that as well on there.
Oh yeah.
I like that. It was,
yeah.
But again, like you mentioned, the punk thing in the late 70s, 77, it kind of sounded the death knell for that kind of music and rock, I guess, in a way. It was moving in a different direction.
Yeah. Yeah, it did. It was a kind of maybe it was needed actually. Everything was getting a bit too kind of I don't know, sort of. I don't know. I had mixed feelings about it, I guess, but yeah, I never really took part in the punk kind of thing, even though I was kind of like some of those guys were the same age as me, but I was more from that other school of blues and rock and roll.
Yeah,
still am really.
Yeah. I did an interview with Bob Henrit, who was the drummer with Argent.
Yeah.
Rod Argent, and he talked about that period in time too. And he had opened a drum store, selling drums and cymbals and all that in England, and all of the punks coming in wanting to buy secondhand, material, drums and all that. And he said we were selling the top of the line, so it kind of, it went downhill from there. He didn't last very long because they all wanted the secondhand.
Yeah. Well, it did have that kind of DIY kind of ethic.
Right. DIY, exactly. Well, you mentioned this earlier. You relocated to France for several years. Let me see if I can. You played with the band Il Baritz.
Yeah, that's right. That was a kind of connection with Wally Waller, who had produced the Bees Make Honey album. Yeah. He and Phil May from The Pretty Things had produced an album for this French millionaire guy called Philippe de Barge, who was a kind of a French millionaire, kind of playboy type guy. Very nice guy, actually, who wanted to be a kind of like a rock star, I guess. Yeah, I think so. The guy who was managing Bees Make Honey, Dave Robinson, I remember he said to me, "You should take the gig." He said he had lost interest in Bees Make Honey. He said he just thought it was I don't know, maybe a bit complacent, and he couldn't take it to America because it was playing kind of American type of music anyway. So it was like taking coals to Newcastle, as he said. So he sort of said to me, "I can't manage this if I'm not interested in it." So he said, "I think you should go to France and take a break, because we've been gigging a lot, like driving up to the grim north of England and all these places, playing like, 4 or 5 nights a week, maybe." And he said, "Maybe you just need a break from, He said, it'll be nice to go to the south of France and get a bit of sun and, think things over." And so I did. And yeah. And it was a good experience, I mean, it was kind of, took me a while to kind of adjust to the pace of life there. It was much slower than what I was used to. and I was quite impatient about it. But I mean, after a while, you kind of think, okay, this is quite good. And, I mean, I didn't think it was particularly going to last. I mean, I think the band lasted a couple of years, and we did some gigs, but we spent an awful lot of time rehearsing. And I think we did play in the Olympia in Paris, and a few other places in like Bordeaux and some other coastal towns around France. Philippe, Philippe had he had some kind of idea, a nice idea of just touring around coastal towns, and it was all very kind of, sort of nice in them. The idea was all fine, but I mean, it wasn't going to last.
How would you characterize the music?
Well, the music kind of was kind of it was quite good for me in a way. It was a kind of I mean, the Pretty Things had played on the album, and they had this great guitar player, Pete Tolson, who had this, and I had to kind of learn his licks really. And they were very interesting and kind of kinetic, this kind of electric. It was a real kind of electric guitar, sort of slightly psychedelic. So I was interested in learning that kind of way of playing, like it was like, I wouldn't call it heavy metal, but it was kind of heavy rock in a way, a bit Led Zeppelin-ish at times, but like kind of good to play.
Yeah,
it's sort of more grandiose than Bees Make Honey in a way, than like playing a country kind of rock or music that was influenced by a lot of music, before when in London and before that was very much influenced by the band,
yeah.
They had such a strong influence, and and I'd been sort of, but I'm more kind of restrained, kind of in a way, and because music had been so kind of before that, it was kind of like pompous in a way, or in danger of being like sort of, overblown. Like there was like all those sort of progressive bands, and the band kind of were really disarming, and we were so subtle. But at this stage in France, I sort of was kind of rocking out again a bit, not being too worried about subtlety or anything like that. And I enjoyed playing it, that kind of kind of was well, it sounds terrible to say contemporary rock, but it was kind of
what
yeah.
How did you meet and come into working with Graham Parker?
Well, that was again when I was in France. Dave Robinson, who was he was the guy who was instrumental in that coming together. I don't know. Have you come across Dave Robinson? I think he managed Brinsley's for a while.
Yeah.
And he was managing Bees Make Honey, and he also had. There was this pub in London in Islington called the Hope and Anchor, where I lived for a while actually when I was playing with Bees Make Honey. And Dave had his office on the top floor.
Stiff Records. He founded Stiff Records.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I mean, he was so enterprising, and he was also, well, it was really through Dave. He had built this studio in the Hope and Anchor, on the second floor where there was some spare space, and he built a studio and started just recording people there. And this guy came in, this guy who worked, pumping gas, and was writing songs. And he just said, "Can I record some songs?" And they said, "Yeah, okay," And he said to me, I remember him saying, "This guy's he's going to be really successful." fantastic songs. You know, he's really great, this guy. And so he asked me to play on that first album, and I came over from France to do that. And I think I just played on that one track, and Soul Shoes. And but I mean, you know, the rumor, I think it was Martin Belmont was playing. You know, they were sounding great. And I mean, Dave, I think, was sort of saying, you know, do you want to play guitar? But I didn't really want to step into anybody's shoes or on anybody's shoes, you know. So that was really it. I didn't see Graham after that until years later. In the 90s, I met him in America, you know, but yeah, that was it. I just did that session and then really didn't have any real contact with, or didn't have any contact with him after that. That was it.
Well, you have that in your CV anyway.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I was quite pleased with that one. You know, I thought it went well.
Well, what was the concept behind Juice on the Loose?
Well, actually, that was myself and this Irish guy, Ron Kavanagh. And when I came back from France, you know, and after you know, living it up on the south coast and all that, come back to London, and it's like grey, and I've got nowhere to live, you know. So I mean, I'd known Ron before I left, and knocked on his door, and I said, "Can I stay on your couch, man?" And he said, "Sure, come in." And I mean, he was great. I mean, he put me up for like 6 months or something before I found a place to live. And while I was staying there, it was like the punk, it was right in the middle of the punk thing. This was probably like 77. And we said, let's do the opposite. Let's form a band, and we'll play. We wanted to play with a couple of little champ amplifiers, you know, small little amplifiers. Maybe the band ended up playing, with a couple of champ amplifiers and an upright bass. Charlie Hart playing upright bass. Geraint Watkins playing accordion. And we were doing Cajun kind of and Zydeco stuff and rock and roll stuff, and kind of sort of swing jump kind of music as well, you know. And so that's really how that came about. I was doing these duo gigs with Ron Kavanagh at the time that he was putting me up in his place, and we were talking about forming a band. And I saw Charlie Hart, and I had met Charlie Hart when I was playing with Bees Make Honey. We did a tour opening for Ronnie Lane's band, and Charlie had been playing with Ronnie Lane. So I saw him in this bar we were playing in Islington, and I said to Ron, "Do you think I should ask Charlie to play with us?" And he said, "Yeah, go on, ask him." You know. So I went over and said, "Charlie, hi, remember me?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "You know, would you be interested in putting a band together?" He said, "Yeah, maybe." You know, so we exchanged phone numbers, and eventually that's how that band came together, you know.
Yeah. Well, you guys were the backing band on tour for Alexis Corner and Chris Farlow.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we did this one tour of Germany with Alexis Corner and Chris Farlow, yeah. And we'd play, I mean, it was kind of full on for us, because we'd play the first set with Chris Farlow, which might be an hour and a half, maybe, you know, and then there might be a break, and then Alexis would come on, and we played a second one with him, and that went on for maybe another hour and a half. I mean, we had our work cut out for us, but it was great playing with those guys, you know. Alexis was great, and, you know, and Chris, he was great too.
Well, you know, it's interesting doing these interviews, the connections that I find. just yesterday, I spoke with James Litherland, who was
Yeah.
a founding member of Coliseum.
Oh,
And
yeah.
he played with Alexis on his Party album. And then Chris Farlow ended up singing on a couple of Coliseum albums. So it's just, I mean, that close, just, within a day of each other. But of course, all these interviews I do, there's common threads, running throughout. So I always find that
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Well, how was it recording and touring with Frankie Miller?
Well, it was it was great. I mean, I didn't do that much recording with Frankie. It was more, we were like the live band.
Okay.
And then, when Frankie recorded, I mean, I played on some things, but and we did demos with Frankie. We do all the demos, and then that was the first stage of the recording process. Then the demos were taken. Maybe that was like pre-production, Frankie kind of like ironing out the songs, and then after that, often we weren't involved. Like you get session players like Chris Spedding and people like that playing. Sometimes I hear these guys playing my licks that I played on the demos, but we didn't go to America to record these albums. So we were like the live band, really, But it was great playing. Frankie's something else. It was just such a thrill, really, playing with Frankie. He's just a full-on performer and singer, like 110%. He's just it was kind of like, for me to experience that kind of intensity, was really great, like to give that much, in a performance, he just really didn't hold back, and he was great, such a great singer.
Yeah.
I was really, knocked out playing with him. It was actually, when I came back from France, I had gone to see this band. I'm trying to remember their name now. But I can't. And I was just kind of, living in this squatting Camden town kind of thinking, what am I going to do? And I knew Frankie. He used to get up and sing with Bees Make Honey. He'd get up and do a couple of songs with us, every now and again. And so I knew him from that time. And he just tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, it's you. Where have you been?" And I said, "France." And he said, "Do you want to come down and have a blow with the band and see how it goes?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd love to." And so I went down to this rehearsal studio, and I think the first song we played was Frankie liked that song, "I Can See Clearly Now." So I remember we played that, and it was just soaring, it was great. And he just sort of smiled at me afterwards and said, "You've got the gig," So
yeah,
it was great.
That's a favorite of mine too, even when it comes up on radio, and he used to always like that song.
Yeah.
Well, you during the 90s, you recorded and toured with blues singer Dana Gillespie.
Yeah.
And
I did quite a bit with them.
Interesting. I have another YouTube channel where I just post songs from various artists throughout the year. And I had posted one of her earlier tracks, the Hollies cover, "Pay You Back with Interest."
Do you really? No, I don't know that one.
That her version of it, it's quite good. So anyway, that's just a little tidbit. But but go ahead with what you were saying with Dana.
That was again through Charlie Hart. I mean, most of these things come around through people that you've worked with. Charlie Hart, who had been playing with Juice on the Loose, back in the 70s. You know, it was at this point he was playing bass with Dana and they needed a guitar player. So I think Charlie might have recommended me. And it was no rehearsal or anything. I think I might have been sent a couple of albums or something. But it was all fairly quick. Like Dana just picked me up at where I was living. And she was really easy to get on with. And we just drove to this gig. and everything sounded good. And that was it, really. I think I worked with her for quite a few years after that. You know, I did a lot of recording with her. And yeah, you can end up going to some pretty exotic places with Dana. You know, there's not a hell of a lot of money in it, but you know, you know, like we played in India for her guru Sai Baba. You know, in front of what she reckoned it was 1 million people, but I'd say it was close. There might have been 800,000 or 900,000 people there from all over the world. You know. It was at this, I think it was his 70th birthday, and it was just an incredible event, you know, with these painted elephants walking around and planes flying overhead with vapor trails and all these different colors. It was like being in the middle of a Salvador Dali painting.
Yeah, surreal.
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody was only given 12 minutes to play. So we went all the way to Puttaparthi in India to play for 12 minutes. So, but we did some gigs around Bombay as well. You know.
So how many songs did you get in 12 minutes? What, 4 songs or so? Or?
Yeah, you know, something like that.
Like that, yeah. Well, you even opened for Bob Dylan in England on his '97 tour. How was that?
Yeah. Well, again, that was with Dana, and because I think Dana was kind of like in the 60s when Dylan first came to London. Dana was kind of like, or Dylan was her beau kind of thing. You know, they used to be seen arm in arm kind of strolling around London. Like I think Dana maybe influenced or introduced Dylan to quite a few people that she knew. And anyway, they didn't necessarily maintain contact, you know, after that. But Dana got this phone call out of the blue from Dylan's manager saying, Bob would like you to open for him on his English gigs, you know. And she said to me, do you want to do it? And I said, of course I want to do it. You know, it sounds cool. And she was saying, great, you know. And apparently, I think Bob Dylan was on tour or something, and he heard her on the radio on a blues program. And he asked somebody that was working with him to go out and get a few of her CDs, and he listened to them and thought, oh, yeah, okay. So, you know, he asked her to just, we only did 4 gigs, I think. We had 2 gigs with him the first night in Bournemouth, this coastal town. And then we did 1 in Cardiff in Wales, I think. And then that was supposed to be it for us. But and this promoter guy, I think it was Harvey Goldsmith, who, you know, sort of said to her, well, that's it, lads, you know. It's all, so we thought that was the end of it. But Dylan kind of made him slightly eat humble pie because he had to, at the last gig in Cardiff, he had to come into, because the last gig was in Wembley Stadium, you know. It was kind of a big deal. You know, people pay a lot of money to get on those gigs, you know, like I think, you know, that's all that stuff going on. We were actually getting paid like 50 quid each for the gig, but that's, you know, that's pretty good going actually, you know. But you know, because a lot of people, you know, they buy onto something like that, and it costs like 30 grand or something, you know, to promote their album, you know. But anyway, he had to come into our dressing room at the end of this little small tour and say, Bob wants you to do Wembley. He wants you to open in Wembley. So can you do that? Are you all free? He said, yeah, okay, I think we can manage. It was kind of enjoyable.
twist your arm a little bit. Yeah, maybe so.
Yeah, but I mean, he was still, he sort of like, he would fine you if you played over time. And I think in Wembley, we were given quite a short slot, maybe 25 minutes. And not the money we were getting paid wasn't great anyway, but we went over by 3 or 4 minutes and he fined us,
Really?
Yeah. So we didn't really get any money out of it. I mean, not that the money was really worth talking about. I'd have done it anyway.
Yeah. Wow.
And our drummer couldn't make it actually because he was playing with Lonnie Donegan. And that was his regular gig. And he said, I can't do it. So Dana had to get in Roger Taylor, the guy who plays with Queen.
Queen,
Yeah. And he was just such a nice guy. He wasn't really a blues drummer though, but he did fine,
he filled in.
Yeah.
I did not know that. Okay. That's what I like about doing these interviews, is finding out these little tidbits of information that I'd never heard before.
Yeah.
Well, let's fast forward a little bit to the new millennium. How did you hook up with Bap Kennedy?
Well, through this guy, Frank Murray. Frank used to manage the Pogues, and he also managed Thin Lizzy for a while. And I just knew Frank over the years. In fact, when we did those early tours with the Woods Band, Frank was our tour manager. He used to book all the hotels and kind of come with us on the road, and he'd just take care of all that kind of stuff, And so he just called me up and said, "There's this guy, Bap Kennedy." He said, "Would you? I think it would suit your playing, I think you'd enjoy working with him." And he said he's really good, and Bap was playing down at this place in London. It's an area called the Angel, and near Islington, and in this pub called Filthy McNasty's, and which was one of Shane McGowan's hangouts, and run by this Irish guy, and Bap at this stage had done an album in Nashville, I think, that was produced by Steve Earle, and some great players on it, like Jerry Douglas and Peter Rowan, really great players, and a really interesting record as well, with some really great songs on it. And so Frank sent me that. I was a bit unwilling at first because I'd been playing with Nick Lowe, I think, just before that, and I was kind of like, Nick was very generous and paid good money per gig, So I was sort of saying to Frank, well, what about the money? Like, what kind of money is he paying, Frank? And he was saying, what, there's like, if you want to do it or you don't want to do it, kind of thing. So I said, no, I'm sorry. But it took me, I didn't go down for ages. I think I went down maybe, but Frank kept insisting. He said, I think it would work. You playing with Bap, just go and check him out. So I did, and I played, and it just clicked. I just really, enjoyed playing on the songs.
Good chemistry.
Yeah.
You enjoyed that. What was it? Didn't you a couple of albums? Is that right? Or...
Yeah, that's right. Lonely Street, and then The Big Picture, I think. And I think in some ways that lineup gave Bap his kind of greatest hit in a way, which was Moonlight Kiss. It was used in that film Serendipity. It was kind of featured quite strongly in that film. They bought it off Bap, actually. I think they just bought it outright. And but it's a lovely song, you know.
It is. Yes, it is. I remember that from the movie. Yeah, I had upcoming some questions about the film soundtracks and that as well. But this may have been out of place because you said prior to this you were touring with Nick Lowe, maybe around the same time, the U.S.,
Yeah,
UK,
it was kind of
in Europe. I wanted to show you this. Although they've aged a little bit since this pick, you toured with these guys too.
It's kind of a bit shiny. Is that Dan Penn and Spooner?
Yeah, and
oh yeah, great. Yeah, I do. Yeah,
the CDs are kind of they reflect too much. Yeah, Dan Penn and Spooner Oldham. Yeah, I had a
that was just such a great experience to tour with those two. They were just the nicest kind of Southern gentlemen you could meet.
Yeah,
they were just great.
Yeah, great music covered by other artists. Yeah, yeah.
Well, Dan just wrote so many great songs, you know.
Yeah.
And that was covered by everybody. Yeah, sure. And they just had this really natural presence on stage. Dan had never toured before. He was a studio guy, you know, an in-house studio songwriter, musician, you know, guitarist, a good steady rhythm, great player, you know. But he had never toured before, so it was Nick, it was Nick's idea to have to invite him to tour, you know, and he loved it, you know. He really enjoyed it. We drove around on this big kind of Winnebago type thing around America. We only did about 15 dates, I think, in America, including Austin, Texas. And Dan really enjoyed it. And then we went to Ireland, and then we did some in Europe as well, I think, yeah. So, I think Dan started kind of touring a bit more after that, you know, he and Spooner. I met them in Dublin a few years later, and they were just kind of doing gigs, you know, just both the two of them, you know.
That would be nice if I could get a conversation or a chat with either one of those guys. That would be really nice. Yeah, that would.
Yeah, sure. Really.
To unearth a lot of that material.
They've got some stories.
Yes, I'm sure they do. Well, a few years down the line, you toured with Donovan.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, that was great. I mean, it didn't last too long, but I really enjoyed it. Donovan's great. But he wanted us to do his greatest hits, like that were all produced, I think, by Mickey Most, you know, this English producer guy who had loads of hits with different English artists. You know, he was a hit maker kind of guy. And so in some ways, you know, we weren't really doing anything original, you know, like Donovan really pretty much wanted us to learn them, you know, like note for note. I had a little bit of room to stretch out on things like Season of the Witch, maybe, you know. But I enjoyed playing those songs, and you know, they're great songs, you know.
Yeah. I have a compilation too of covers of Donovan tunes. Have you ever heard Lou Rawls' "Season of the Witch"?
No.
Yeah, it's fascinating finding some of these, you know, covers that I never knew existed, or I never knew that any artist like that would be interested in doing. But it's quite good. It's quite good. It's different, but it is good. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Huh.
Well,
Donovan was quite I think he was quite I mean, you see him on like in the 60s, like on the Andy Williams show and stuff like that.
Right.
He had a wide range in his kind of popularity. He has a kind of a very likable kind of personality.
Yeah. I was glad to see him break out of that Bob Dylan mold, that, stereotype that was hovered over him in the beginning. I was glad to see him break out of that. But
Yeah.
He came into his own.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
Talk about the Devil's Spine Band.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was, I mean, that was kind of going on more roughly, well, that was kind of the inception of that was kind of going on around the same time as I was playing with Donovan. I was playing with a keyboard player called Trevor Knight, who's a good friend, and Trevor had a band, I think in the 80s, called Auto da Fe with Gay Woods. Actually, I think he and Gay were married. They have a daughter, and anyway, Trevor, we were working actually with an Irish songwriter, Pete Cummins, who had just put out an album, and we had both played on it. And that's where I really met Trevor, was in the studio playing on Pete Cummins' album. And then he asked me, he invited me, he said, he asked me if I'd like to get involved with this project called the Devil's Spine Band. Trevor has written a lot of music for theatre and kind of experimental theatre and stuff like that. And we were both Captain Beefheart fans. He wanted this music to have a kind of a, I mean, Trevor he didn't know that much about blues. I introduced him to all these people like Muddy Waters and Howling Wolf, especially. He's really taken with them. And I was playing with a band called Left, Right, and Center at the time. It was like a 3-piece blues, gut bucket blues, straight down the line kind of band. And Trevor came to see us playing, and he just really kind of was very taken with, and he wanted. It's a kind of, the Devil's Spine thing is quite difficult to explain in a way, because it's a theatre, conceptual kind of theatre thing. At least that's how it started out. And it was kind of based on the story of Oscar Wilde going to America in the 1800s to a mining town. I can't remember the name of the town at the moment. And it's like, it's true, I mean, but that was kind of like, that was sort of a basis for it, for the thing. We had these kind of Japanese Buto dancers as well that Trevor had been working with. And I mean, it was the first time I ever got involved in that kind of thing, theatre. We played the Galway Arts Festival, and I think we did several nights there, and that was our opening kind of thing. And it was kind of, it was, we weren't just playing, like we couldn't just hide behind our guitars. We had to kind of do something or move around, or so it was kind of good in that way. And then I think actually, as all that was happening, Donovan's gig came around. Trevor was asked to be the musical director, really. So we were just kind of drafted into that. We weren't playing that often with Donovan. It was every odd weekend. We do a festival maybe in Europe or England, and then come back. But the Devil's Spine thing, I mean, I'm still working with that. Actually, I was going to try to get a plug-in about the Devil's Spine. There's a recording that we worked on last winter, and it's also stuff that we've been working on over a couple of years. Some of the stuff Trevor and I wrote together, and it'll be out on. It's kind of yeah. The album will be out probably on Bandcamp in a few months' time, and I think there'll be vinyl versions as well as streamable ones, and even maybe CD. I don't know how CD is. Does anybody buy CDs anymore? I'm not sure.
I do.
Oh yeah, good.
I'll buy the one copy. If you put it on CD. Yeah, then you can be successful on the CD market. Yeah. Okay. And what is it going to be called again?
I think it'll just be called the Devil's Spine Band. I think the Devil's Spine is actually a mountain range in Mexico. I think it's called the Devil's Spine.
Okay.
So that's sort of how that name came about. Yeah.
Well,
and we've now got a singer, Honor Heffernan, who's a great singer. But we haven't actually played. COVID kind of stopped basically live gigs. I mean, there were no live gigs for 2 years.
Yeah.
And I've done very few since that initial lockdown. I've been more into recording at home and doing I did a little bit of film music, and I quite like that area,
Yeah, I was going to say, I was going to comment on that in just a bit, but speaking of, but back in the intro, we talked about the different types of guitars that you've mastered, that you play. Which type was the most difficult for you to learn, would you say?
Well, I suppose the most challenging in a way for me was, when I actually flipping the guitar over. There was a friend of mine, we were both doing some session work with the Pretty Things, actually, and this other guitarist, Bill Lovelady, fantastic guitar player. He also played classical guitar, and he was playing all these beautiful classical guitar pieces in the studio. I was saying to him, wow, I'd love to be able to do that, but I could never do that. You can't do that kind of stuff upside down. And he sort of said, well, why don't you just flip the strings? I'll show you a couple of things. And I had this acoustic guitar, and I just flipped the strings on it, and then started learning these kind of finger style, using my thumb for the bass on the guitar, the bass strings, It was a completely different way of playing. It was like playing another instrument, actually. And I just got really obsessed with it and just was practicing for hours, getting up in the morning early and practicing. I mean, I really thought, wow, this is it. This is fantastic. And, learning classical pieces and learning a couple of little pieces by Bach or something, but it really, it was really a different way of looking at music, it had this real clarity that I liked, So that was pretty challenging. I mean, otherwise I've never been, being left-handed. I mean, like practicing electric guitar at home is not, I don't know anybody who does that really.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very live kind of thing, unless you're recording at home, I think. But actually playing an electric guitar through an amp by yourself, I don't know really. And I've never really, I was never really strongly enough attracted to jazz guitar to want to master it. And it does, I mean, now, I mean, I can appreciate it, but it does take an awful lot of knowledge, a lot of music theory knowledge, I think, to kind of get that down, even though there's different levels of it, I mean, I used to love, those guitar albums that were made with Eddie Lang and Lonnie Johnson, those kind of. They were just so great. But that was as close as I got to jazz, really, you know.
Uh-huh.
Like a lap steel is kind of very similar to playing the guitar, except the strings are that far away. You can't fret them, you know. And I just bought this lap steel guitar. There was just an old music shop around the corner from where I was living in Hammersmith in London. And this guy, there was this lap steel guitar in the window, and I said to the guy, "How much is that?" And he said, "Oh, 15 quid or something." So I just bought it, like, and took it home and started messing around with it, because it's very similar. I mean, there was a lap steel in the studio when I did that Woodsband album. It was on a stand, and I played it on, I think, on one of the songs. And because it was very like slide guitar. I just tuned it to an open tuning, maybe an open D or an open G, and then it's very similar, except that you can't fret and you can't make chords. And then it gets very tricky if you want to play minor chords. You have to kind of slant the slide, you know, the metal bar. You have to kind of slant it. But it was just the sound of it, actually. I started getting all this work as a lap steel player. Even Shane McGowan, I got work playing lap steel on his record. I mean, I just much better players than I am around. I mean, I hear these guys playing, you know, like lap steel, like Western swing, you know, and they're incredible players. You know, I can't do all that kind of stuff, but you know, I just love the sound of it, and I think people are attracted by the sound of it. Just such a beautiful sound.
Well, speaking of writing, you know, during the lockdown, which a lot of musicians were kind of forced into, it's kind of a mixed blessing in a way, I guess. Over the years, do you prefer composing, writing, or playing live?
Well, I always loved playing live, actually. There's just something about it. It was, I still would love it if it wasn't so difficult trying to put a band together. Because, you know, I don't live in Dublin. I live kind of out in the west of Ireland. So I'd have to go to Dublin, find some musicians, try to get them to rehearse, and then start hustling around looking for gigs, you know. And there's not that even many gigs now. So, but it was my life blood in a way, playing live. I've always loved it, and so the writing thing wasn't so important to me as playing live. But recently, since the lockdown, I've been writing, but more sort of instrumental, kind of filmy type music rather than songs.
Right.
I started. It just coincided with the lockdown thing that I upgraded to a better computer, with a more powerful kind of one, and plugged in a MIDI keyboard through an interface, and then started learning about all these amazing sampled instruments that you can, you know, like I downloaded this free orchestra. That was like the gateway drug, really. You know, I couldn't believe how good it sounded.
Yeah.
Because I'd love to be able to write good, you know, string arrangements or horn arrangements as well. You know, I've done a little bit of horn arranging, but very little, you know, but just a little bit on one album I did. So, and just learning more about music itself, you know. So that's where I've been kind of really locked into all that since lockdown, and learning piano as well, because I just find it, my whole understanding of music is really widened by learning piano, and I just love it anyway, you know. And I mean, there's all these guys like on YouTube telling you, imparting information that's taken them years to acquire, you know. You know, I've got a monitor screen right in front of me, and when I'm playing the piano in my little studio room, and you know, people saying, okay, so that, you know, if you want to play in this scale, you do this. If you want to, you know, just I mean, it's like having piano lessons from in whatever style you want, like boogie woogie or jazz or anything, you know.
Yep.
I mean, I always messed around with keyboard instruments anyway. We had a piano in the house when I was a kid, but and I was always playing around on it, but I never had piano lessons. So, but I just find for understanding, you know, about just different aspects of music, there's something really clear about the piano. You know, it's.
Well, was that more challenging for you to pick up the piano or the guitar? Which one was a little more?
Well, I'd never go looking for a gig as a piano player. You know, I don't have ambitions of being a great piano player or anything like that at this stage. You know, but I think it's so worth learning. You know, just to get ideas and to write musical ideas, even. You know, the more dexterity in a way I have on the piano,
yeah.
You know, the more I'm able to express kind of like different ideas. But so the guitar, I don't know, the guitar, like, I mean, the guitar is something, it was like when I first started playing electric guitar and, you know, just playing a chord was like, wow, you know, it's a pleasure to play. I never found it challenging in that way, you know.
Yeah.
And even piano, I'm not really thinking of it in those terms as being challenging. It's more just something that I enjoy and that I can learn from, you know.
Yeah, expressing yourself through the music.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, it's just and now I've kind of, this world of sampled instruments is just like, you can play any Arabic instrument, they're beautifully sampled. You know, people spend hours recording all these nuances of some master player, you know, playing. And then it's, you know, channeled through to you, you know, via a sample. You can play these things on a keyboard, on piano, on a keyboard. So you can kind of mix up music. You can have, you know, all kinds of different orchestras playing with, you know, electric guitars and, you know, different ethnic instruments from around the world. It's just, I'm still kind of really wowed by it. I'm
Well, you for one, you know, have seen the advances in technology when you first started out.
Yeah. Well, that was like the first time I really went into a studio proper was with the Woods band. You know, it was a big deal to go into a studio in those days. I mean, you know, I remember when we went to London to record, we went into the studio in Willesden called Morgan Studios. And the engineer said, oh yeah, the Kinks were here last week. And I went, what? The Kinks? Like, what? You know, the other guy, and there was another guy in the band, he played mandolin and guitar. He was so intimidated by the whole recording process that he left. He said, I can't handle it. He left. He said, do you realize this is going down for posterity?
Right.
And I said, yeah, but I'm not thinking too much about it. Like, he said, well, I am. And he left, you know, as like, he just didn't have enough confidence in himself. But
yeah.
You know, now recording is like you've got more, you know, I mean, you've got more facility than the Beatles or anybody ever had. You've got an infinite number of tracks to record on. You can, you know, I mean, and there's so many tutorials and, you know, ways of learning about mixing and mastering and all those aspects of recording. I mean, it's fantastic, really. I mean, you can make great recording on your phone.
Yeah, you're right. You know, in
or at least a workable one.
Right.
You know.
And pardon the pun, but it's right at your fingertip.
I saw an interview with Eric Clapton. They were asking him about how he goes about making albums. Well, I think this is maybe in the lockdown. And he said, well, I record a guitar part on my phone and then I send it to somebody else who's maybe in Australia, and then he sends it to Nathan, the bass player, who's in Los Angeles. And I mean,
yeah, you don't have to be in the same space. I mean, you can be all over the world, like you said, and record albums and that kind of. It's mind blowing.
It is mind blowing, yeah. And yet, I think there is something. I mean, those Duke Ellington recordings that I originally just fell in love with. I mean, those guys were all probably recording around one microphone. I mean, you can't forget that. It's great music, and it's not, it's music that lasts. And I mean, I can listen to those records right now and just still really enjoy them as much as I did then. They were there's such fantastic sounding records. There is something that happens when you're recording live with other people, other musicians and players, and you're communicating that way. I think there is a certain special quality, but yeah, you can also record with somebody on the other side of the world. It's quite amazing.
Yeah, it is something. That's the good side. That's the upside of technology. We all know the evils. We won't go into that, but speaking of, go ahead.
And not everybody talking about AI now, and like, you can ask it to write a song or something. Could you write a song in the style of, say, the Beatles met the Roy, the Everly Brothers or something? Oh yeah, AI will write you a song like, It's kind of like, I don't know.
That's a little eerie, yeah. That's a little out there, but yeah, you still have to have the human element. If we start losing that, then yeah, I don't want to see that ever happen.
No, me neither. I mean, I don't think you could play phony blues. I mean, I think blues has to have the human element.
Yeah.
And it's all its imperfections are part of it, like what makes it so great,
Right. Exactly. Do you find it's speaking of guitar and piano, when you make a mistake on guitar, is it easier to hide it than on piano? Stand out.
Well, probably because I'm so used to the guitar, I can kind of bend a note or follow. You sometimes follow the idea and think, okay. But on piano, like, because of my, it's more obvious because of my kind of, my level of ability in a way. If I make a mistake, that's it. It's like,
yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. Well, we did refer a little bit to the movie soundtracks. Stormy Monday, Leaving Las Vegas, and you mentioned Serendipity earlier. What was it like adding songs to those movies and seeing the end product, the film, in correlation with your music?
Well, it was pretty exciting at the time, like we were in Stormy Monday, we were actually, with Tommy Lee Jones and Sting and Melanie Griffiths and Sean Bean, who was unknown really at the time, Sean Bean, but like Tommy Lee Jones, and Melanie Griffiths, and we were playing a kind of, we were supposed to be a band we were the Krakow Jazz Ensemble from Poland, Krakow, and playing in this club, this kind of sleazy jazz club in Newcastle, and Sting was the club manager, and it's that movie really came out of of a band that I was kind of playing. Charlie Hart kind of invited me to play with this band, playing kind of freeform music, and I found that kind of, it was interesting, and it was kind of like freeform, but you had to listen to each other and kind of pick up on what each other were playing, but there was no pre-planned kind of pieces. Not really. Sometimes you'd end up playing another instrument, like picking up a kalimba or something and playing it, But Mike Figgis, he was playing flugelhorn with the band, and he came in one day and said, "I'm making a film, and he said, I've got money. I've been able to raise finance to do it. And Sting's going to be in it. And he'd written the script, I think. And it was a kind of a comment on that era of Reagan and Thatcherism. And it was a kind of a comment on that and on how it was affecting, kind of lesser well-off kind of places like Newcastle, where it was filmed in Newcastle. But so we were just kind of, we were playing freeform kind of music. So it was just like 1, 2, 3, go, bang, bang. But also we did actually rehearse quite a bit. I remember I had the music. There was a wooden floor where we were rehearsing, and I had a piece of chalk, and I kind of mapped out all the music. I still have a photograph of it somewhere. I made a map of where it was like hopscotch. First you're in this square, and then you jump into that square, because I didn't know how to write music or anything. And then you're in that one there, and there were different, sort of, one of them was a fast movement and the other one was slower and stuff. So there was a certain amount of structure, to it, but it was kind of very free flowing. And I don't know, I think it's hard for some people to take, actually, I don't think it's necessarily easy to listen to. So I have no hits there.
Yeah. Well, did your songs kind of take on a new life when you synced it with the soundtrack, the movie itself, the film? And then do you still, when you hear those songs, do you have the imagery of the film? It comes to mind.
Yeah, I've got kind of, I suppose, like interweaving, kind of images of when we were actually recording, say, Moonlight Kiss, we were all broke and like going into this little studio in East Grinstead in London, which is the Scientology capital of England, I think, and into this little studio in a back garden, and it was a guy, I'm trying to remember his name, he used to play with ELO, I think. And he had a studio, and he was recording us in his kind of back garden. And then I think of, seeing it on the big screen, like at this very romantic kind of scene where it's like winter and I think it's like snowing and they're in an outdoor ice skating rink, and it's all very romantic, and thinking, wow. But I mean, I was kind of had mixed feelings in a way, because we never, they bought the song outright from BAP, and then didn't credit us with playing at all. There was no musicians credited. It was like, one of those kind of KTEL records, when the credits went up. It's just the main artists whose names were mentioned. And yet I played a high-strung guitar, Nashville style high-strung guitar, where you take the alternative high strings off a 12-string guitar, and you just use the high strings on the guitar. It's a lovely sound. It's very crystal kind of sound, and I constructed this guitar solo. Me and the producer really spent a few hours working out this thing, and whoever was the musical director in that film liked that sound, obviously, because they used a high-strung guitar motif throughout the film. So they kind of nicked my idea without giving me any credit. I was a bit peeved about it.
I would be too. Yeah, you bet. Yeah. Well, I think when you talked earlier about your twin guitar playing, I think Thin Lizzy nicked that idea from you too.
Yeah, I don't know about that actually. It was very much in vogue at the time.
Facetious. I'm being facetious. Yeah, I don't know either. I wouldn't.
I mean, there was, remember all those bands like Wishbone Ash and stuff. I think they were doing that even before I heard the Allman Brothers do it. But I think if Thin Lizzy nicked anything from us, I think when I was with Terry Woods, Philip was very interested when we were doing kind of merging Irish music with rock music. And he came down to a lot of rehearsals, and he gave me this lovely guitar strap, actually, which I wish I hadn't lost. It was like it had this horseshoe on it, and it was like a goldish kind of horseshoe. It was a fantastic thing, and I can't remember how it got lost, but it did. But he was listening to us, and then it wasn't long after that they came out with Whiskey in the Jar, which was their first hit. It was all around that time, so I think there might have been an influence there, because nobody was doing what we were doing, like merging Irish music with with electric guitars and all that,
Right. Yeah. I was being a little facetious when I said that, but kind of tongue in cheek with that comment. But
yeah.
Who knows? But we'll talk a little bit about A Passing Place.
Oh yeah. Well, that really came out of my live playing. It's a young filmmaker. It's his first feature film, and it's actually, I'm going to go to the premiere of it in a couple of days. I think it's Wednesday on the 12th of July.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, it's being premiered at the Galway Film Fleadh. Fleadh is Irish for festival, So it's the Galway Film Fleadh. Along with hundreds of other films, mind you, from different filmmakers around the world, I think, young filmmakers, But it was like it was a really, just a really good experience for me, because that's, in lockdown time, for something like that to come my way was just great. Actually, it's just what I needed, and I had been. I'm interested in film music. It's very competitive, mind you. I don't know if I could endure it. I don't know. There's kids coming out of Berkeley and music college now, who know everything about programming and computers and orchestration, and it's it's very competitive, but I would love to be involved with writing film music in some kind of way, because it's very enjoyable. The more I learn about it, syncing music to picture, and telling a story with music, I think is and implying things with music, not necessarily that somebody is happy or sad, but implying that, and there's an uneasiness in a situation, stuff, that kind of stuff, it's very interesting, and I've always liked. I've never been a great lyric writer, I've always liked writing instrumental music.
I think a great soundtrack can make or break a movie. I really do, and I've always been one who enjoys the soundtrack. A lot of times more than the movie itself.
Yeah.
I saw the trailer for that movie, and it looks very interesting.
Oh, good.
And it is kind of just in that clip itself. There's kind of an ominous mood, to it. So
yeah.
You can feel that. Yeah. Yeah, it looks very interesting. Well, I hope it does well. I really do.
Thanks. So do I. Yeah.
I wonder, will it be available like on Netflix or anything, any kind of app? Do you know?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I really don't know much about that world, actually, how it all works. But I'm sure it'll be, even on my website, if there's a way of linking through to it, there'll be some kind of link, But otherwise, I'm not sure. I suppose it depends on how well it does. I think the people that are running the Galway Film Festival were enthusiastic about it and said nice things. And so and just the fact that it managed to get on that festival, which is fairly prestigious, I think, but so it just depends on how well it does, I don't know.
I'll check that. But yeah, I think you do have a knack for writing film music. So I really enjoyed your imaginary motion picture soundtrack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which one was that now?
Your imaginary motion picture soundtrack that you.
Oh, really? Did you listen to it?
I did. Especially Big Country. Yeah, that's one. And you talk about the orchestration and the strings and everything. That's the kind of that I enjoy. And
yeah, and I managed to get some.
Yeah, I've always been.
I got some twangy guitar in there as well.
I was going to say, the always been a fan of the Western soundtracks. Even going back, even the Italian, the spaghetti westerns, Ennio Morricone, that kind
fantastic.
Of
yeah, me too.
Yeah, love that stuff. So,
and and who was the guy? Bernard Herrmann, who used to do the Hitchcock movies. I mean, that's pretty
right.
Didn't
you do a Taxi Driver too, or is that somebody
else? I think that was one of the last things he did or something like that. Yeah, I think he did do Taxi Driver. Yeah,
and of course John Barry. You have to mention his music, the James Bond and other kinds.
Yeah, sure, really great.
A lot of good composers. Well, looks like we're kind of winding down here a little bit. What's keeping you busy these days, Ed?
Well, mainly I kind of just working on the piano and writing music, really. I'm not doing. I think the Devil's Spine thing may start doing some gigs to promote the recordings that we did, but that wouldn't be until maybe the autumn,
Yeah.
So that's really pretty much what I'm doing. I was playing a lot live, in Dublin. I had a couple of residencies before the lockdown. So I was, I could be I end up doing 3-4 gigs a week. I was also involved with this thing called Ladies in the Blues. We used to do theatres around Ireland. It was about, like women blues singers. There were 4 great girl blues singers doing Bessie Smith all the way up to Janis Joplin kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that kind of finished with lockdown as well. So the live playing thing is, I don't know, it's quite distant now. It seems quite remote now. So I'm just working away at the piano and just writing instrumental stuff. That's pretty much it right now, anyway.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ed, for sharing.
You're very welcome.
And being a part of.
Thank you. And thanks for asking me, Greg.